Hi, my name is Laura, and this is Anne of Green Books. Today, I want to review and kind of just talk about The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. I just realized that I forgot to look up how to pronounce her name before I started filming, so pause. I'm going to do that really quickly.
It's pronounced Roshani Chokshi.
Roshani Chokshi.
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad I looked it up because it's pronounced Roshani Chokshi, and I think I was saying Roshani Chokshi. So, Roshani Chokshi. So, The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi is a book that I read maybe about a month ago now. So hopefully I remember everything about it accurately and remember what I want to talk about. I think it's always awkward being at the start of a new YouTube channel because I want to talk about a lot of books that I've read recently, but they might be books that I've read some amount of time ago before I planned on starting a booktube channel. So I want to talk about The Last Tale of the Flower Bride, and we will see if I remember everything perfectly accurately and touch on everything that I want to talk about. So first of all, why am I choosing this as one of the books I've read recently to make a in-depth video about on my channel? The Last Tale of the Flower Bride is a book that I feel like I had heard a lot about. I felt like it was quite hyped and getting really good reviews, and that was why I had put it on my to-read list. I did also read a couple things by Roshani Chokshi before picking up The Last Tale of the Flower Bride, and I had really liked those, and so I was quite excited. The other things that I've read by Roshani Chokshi are her short story from Sword, Stone, Table, the only book that I own that I'll be talking about in this video. The other Roshani Chokshi books I got from the library. And then I was at the library one time and I saw Once More Upon a Time, I think it's called, by Roshani Chokshi. And I hadn't heard anything about it, and it looked short and it looked like a fairy tale adaptation type of thing, and I thought it would be fun, so I picked that up, and I really enjoyed that. I'll probably touch on that a little more throughout this video as well. So after enjoying those two things by Roshani Chokshi, and really feeling like I loved her writing style especially, I was super excited to pick up The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. I didn't know too much about it other than that it had a gorgeous cover, and Roshani Chokshi's writing is gorgeous. And I knew it was in the adult fantasy section of the library, at least. That was really all I knew about it, and I was quite excited to pick it up. I think I'll just start with my rating of The Last Tale of the Flower Bride to give you a little context for generally my thoughts on the book. I did rate it 3.75 stars. So in short, my review of the book is that I felt like the writing was 5-star writing. The writing is absolutely gorgeous. I have a little excerpt that I want to read to kind of illustrate this for you. But I feel like plot-wise, it didn't necessarily feel to me like there was enough going on to warrant the book being as long as it is. And it's not a long book. So I'm not saying that the book was absurdly long and that was a problem. I just think that the other two things I've read by Roshani Chokshi were shorter, and maybe that worked better for me. But I specifically want to review The Last Tale of the Flower Bride because I do think it might have been marketed a little bit wrong. And I feel like I sort of went into it with the wrong expectations. And maybe if I had gone in with the right expectations, I would have liked it even better and rated it even higher. I'm not sure. I do want to review it for folks who might like it even better than me, but might not know that they would like it because maybe they have the wrong expectations about the book. So that was a brief overview of my thoughts on the book and my rating of the book. Let me jump next into a short summary of the book. From what I remember, it's about a man. It's not about a man. It follows a man who is very obsessed with fairy tales and myth. And he meets this woman. I need to look up her name really quickly. Okay, so it follows a man whose name I honestly don't remember, and we might not ever learn his name. I'm not sure, which I do kind of enjoy as just kind of a plot device. And he meets this mysterious woman named Indigo Maxwell Castaneda. Indigo Maxwell Castaneda. I can't speak. And they get married, but there's always something unsettling and mysterious about Indigo. So the book pulls from and kind of adapts a few different myths and fairy tales. One myth being the myth of Psyche and Eros. Another thing I'm going to have to look up to see if I remember that correctly. It's the myth that C.S. Lewis writes about in Till We Have Faces. So if you're familiar with that myth, from what I remember, Psyche and Eros get married, and he tells her that she can never look at his face or his true form. And so The Last Tale of the Flower Bride pulls from that kind of idea, where we learn that Indigo has some kind of secrets and a past that she will never tell her husband about, and she doesn't want him to ask about it. And that kind of evolves in certain ways throughout the story. There is also a previous timeline talked about in the book of Indigo's childhood and her relationship with her friend Azure, if I remember correctly the friend's name. Okay, yes, the friend's name is Azure. Azure? I don't know how to pronounce anything these days, and I can't talk today. So, what other things do you need to know about the summary of The Last Tale of the Flower Bride? It is set in the Pacific Northwest, and I am originally from Western Washington, so I did really enjoy the setting. I think it's not spoilers to also say that this book is set in present day for the most part. I don't remember how clear that's made, like what technology is used or what references are used, but you know, there's mentions of business and technology, and it's clearly fairly contemporary. And I think that that was a little surprising to me. So that's why it's one of the things that I want to mention to kind of set the expectations for the book. So I think that's a decent plot summary of really what I can say without any spoilers. That might conclude the part of the video that I can really guarantee as spoiler-free. I think for the rest of the video, I will start with what might count as very mild spoilers that a lot of people might not even consider spoilers. But I know we all have different opinions on what counts as spoilers. So this is going to be my disclaimer, and I will write something on screen to say that there might be mild spoilers from here on out, and then I will mark again when the spoilers get less mild, more severe, more extreme. So the first thing I want to talk about is the genre that this book was marketed as, and how I think it might not have totally been accurate. And that might have been part of the reason I felt like I went into it with the wrong expectations and rated it kind of lower than I thought that I would. To my knowledge, this book was marketed as fantasy. I got it from the fantasy section of my library, and I've seen it in the fantasy section of bookstores. I think this might have been kind of a strategic marketing move because I think most of Roshani Chokshi's work is fantasy. And so perhaps the publishers just wanted her audience to hear about this book and feel that it was familiar and something that they wanted to pick up. But I think the book was written in a way that felt like fantasy, and there were descriptions of elements that seemed magical. By the time I finished the book, I realized that I don't think it really was a fantasy. I think that I would put it in the genre maybe of mild horror or mystery, suspense, thriller, or maybe just literary fiction. Maybe you could call it magical realism. But all that to say, I'd put it in one of those other genres, not necessarily fantasy. I don't want to say that it's a problem that the book was sort of in a different genre than fantasy, but I do think that going in with the expectations of what I expect from a fantasy novel and not really getting that did kind of affect my reading experience. And I think that the way the book is marketed is going to attract certain readers, and maybe there's other readers who aren't getting attracted to the book who might like it even more. In a minute or so, I'll say a little more with more extreme spoilers to kind of explain everything that I'm talking around and alluding to. But before I do that, I want to read an excerpt from the book that kind of illustrates how gorgeous the writing style is, because I do really want to explain this review in a way that gets people to read this book, because I do think if you're interested in reading it, you should read it, even though I rated it 3.75, which isn't a bad rating, but it's lower than I thought I was going to rate it. But I do recommend it. If you're interested in this book, I do think you should read it. So let me find a picture I took of an excerpt of the book. I had to take a picture on my phone to remember the excerpt because I checked the book out from the library and I've already returned it. Okay, I found it. This excerpt says, "I have since learned that marriage is nothing more than a spell strengthened by daily ritual. The spell requires libations, mundane musings hoarded and pored over, the repetition of small dismays, the knowledge of how your spouse takes their coffee. Marriage asks for that crust of time you were selfishly saving for yourself. Marriage demands blood, for it says, 'Here is what is inside me, and I tithe it to you.' A marriage cannot live on honest midnights alone." So that's the kind of way that Roshani Chokshi writes, and I thought it was absolutely beautiful. And so the book started off really strong for me because I loved that excerpt. I thought that there were really interesting things that she was saying, and the characters were quite interesting, and I really liked the references to Psyche and Eros. And the book also opens with a quote from C.S. Lewis. I think it was something like, "Myth is just lies breathed through silver," something like that. And I think that really sets the tone for the book. And there were other references to C.S. Lewis's writings throughout, which I thought were really interesting and really landed for me as a Narnia kid. So I really liked a lot of imagery and the writing and the references. But as the book went on, I realized that I didn't like any of the characters, which is automatically hard for me to like a book where I don't like any of the characters. But it happens sometimes. Sometimes I like a book where I don't like any of the characters. I particularly didn't understand the things the characters were doing. They didn't feel relatable. And I think that this is where my maybe wrong expectations of the book as fantasy, more so than it was, kind of led to me being disappointed by the book. Particularly, I mentioned that the book is set in present day, and I think that was quite surprising to me. And I think that maybe if the book had not been set in something that looked very much like the real world in present day, I might have liked it more. I might have let some more things slide about the characters' decisions and motivations. But this dichotomy of the setting being the real world, but the characters doing things that kind of felt fantastical, but mostly in a way that they didn't feel real or relatable, I personally didn't love that. But also, take everything I say with a grain of salt, because one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this book is because I have complicated feelings on it. The more I think about it, maybe the more I like it, because I have continued thinking about it. And that is a good thing if a book sticks with me and I keep thinking about it. So that's always the difficult thing about rating a book right after you read it. I have to rate a book right after I read it because I need to really remember the book and remember how I felt about the book. But if a book is something where I really keep thinking about it, sometimes I feel like I really want to raise my rating over time. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. I might like the book even more than it's sounding like I do. I think before I jump into full spoilery territory and just kind of fully explain what happened in the book and all the things I've been alluding to, the last not too spoilery thing that I wanted to talk about was the setting being in the Pacific Northwest. Like I mentioned, I loved learning that the setting of the book was the Pacific Northwest early on, and I really felt like Roshani Chokshi's gorgeous writing about lush green trees and the rainy woods of the Pacific Northwest and things like that felt so accurate to the Pacific Northwest, and I loved it. I felt nostalgia for home, and I was really enjoying that. But if I remember correctly, I really felt like the setting of the Pacific Northwest largely dropped out as the book went on, which I think is fine, but that was something that I was really loving at the beginning of the book, and I kind of wish that this sense of being so accurately in the Pacific Northwest, I wish that had stuck around throughout the whole book. However, there is a setting on an island. I was specifically imagining islands off the coast of Washington, but I cannot remember now if she specifically said or if she just talked about the Pacific Northwest. But I was kind of specifically picturing Whidbey Island, which is a place that I've been throughout my life. And the things that she talked about in the plot of the book did feel like things that could happen on Whidbey Island. Specifically, Whidbey Island has a lot of urban myths and also real history of things happening that made it really seem like the things that do happen in The Last Tale of the Flower Bride could happen on Whidbey Island. So in that way, the setting did kind of stick around throughout the book for me, but I do think that the vivid descriptions of the Pacific Northwest as the setting fell off throughout the book for me, and I would have loved if that had stuck around. So those are the main points that I wanted to discuss in my review of The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. It was a little disjointed so far because, like I said, I didn't want to give too many spoilers for folks that do want to read the book. But now I'm just going to jump right into full extreme spoilers. Don't read. Don't listen or watch the rest of the video if you don't want to know exactly what happens in the book. But basically, At some point, the book starts to feel just like a murder mystery or thriller, where you come to realize that something happened between Indigo and Azure when they were young, living on the island. And you start to feel like there's going to be some twist or plot reveal in the book. And I guessed what it was. And when the book ended, indeed, with this plot twist or reveal, I felt like the book was leading up to that ending, and the whole book kind of hinged on the shocking reveal of the ending. But since I had guessed the ending, it didn't totally land for me. And I do think that a good murder mystery or thriller or whatever should be a good book whether or not you guess the twist. And it was a good book. It was gorgeously written, but I just wasn't sure that enough happened in the book to warrant it being a full-length book. So you come to find out, huge spoilers, you come to find out that Indigo is not Indigo. She is Azure. She killed Indigo when they were young, and she took her identity. And the way I just said it sounds simple and less beautiful than the book is, but that's really the boiled down plot. And the gorgeous writing of the book kind of makes it seem like there's more at play than there was. There are some fairy tale elements, and when the girls are young, they believe that on their 18th birthday, I think, they are going to be taken to the Fae realm and recognized as true Fae. But that doesn't happen, and that isn't made real in the world of the book. So that's what I mean when I say it wasn't really a fantasy. It was kind of just two rather mentally unwell young girls having real life issues and committing murder in a way that didn't feel accurate to real life or relatable to me. So the book was gorgeous, and I would love to hear what people think if you read it or if you have read it, but I think it just fell a little flat for me at the end. Okay, that is the end of my review for The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. Sorry, it was quite rambly. I didn't totally know how to organize my thoughts about this book. I hope that my videos will be a little more organized in the future, and I hope that even this rambly review is enjoyable for folks. I would really love to hear what you thought if you read or read The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. It was interesting, and like I said, I had a lot to say about it, and I thought a lot about it, so maybe I like it more than I thought I did. But when I think about really the boiled down plot, I don't know that it feels quite worth it to me. So in a way, maybe it was overhyped, maybe it was marketed wrong, and maybe the audience for this book is out there if it is marketed in a different way. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for being here, and I will talk to you all later.